All right, I'm starting the third book in my three-book series that I launched a little over a year ago. And the third book is focused on the ecological crisis and non-locality and gravitational entropy. And so this was a question that Seb's Solomon asked me about when I pointed out that only Roger Penrose is emphasizing how gravitational entropy is the opposite of the entropy of matter. And so as science using technology has tried to decrease the entropy of matter, we have increased the gravitational entropy in ecology. And so she asked, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, basically, it means time is speeding up and that we're destroying space as life on Earth. So why is that? Because as Roger Penrose uses the Broglie-Einstein relation to explain that mass as space-time or gravity as space-time originates from frequency. The mass originates from frequency, and so it's the origin of gravity also is based on the mass from frequency. And so he calls this the gravitational potential energy. That's really the gravitational dark energy, or the dark energy, and it's from what's called quantum negative entropy or negentropy, and life also relies on quantum negentropy, which essentially means that to be alive means to absorb from our environment energy information at a faster rate than we excrete it as heat or other waste products and so this origin of life is actually quantum biology, but in science we define entropy in terms of matter instead of gravity. And so we think of gravity as a symmetric rest frame that we can objectively measure. But what this is showing is because it takes time to make a measurement, and therefore time is inherently asymmetrical. And this is Roger Penrose's big point, is that at the origin of the universe, time, not only is it asymmetrical, it's highly negentropic. It's highly coherent and has a high negative entropy. And so when matter first appeared, there was a high entropy of matter, but it was in contrast to the very low entropy of gravity, the negative entropy. And so most scientists are just assuming that as the universe accelerates in space, that time will slow down and the entropy will increase. But as Roger Penrose points out, that eventually all matter as mass it'll collapse into black holes, and then the black holes will all collapse into a singularity. But eventually those black holes will evaporate as Hawking radiation due to the quantum entanglement of the matter. So there's the Hawking radiation this is what Roger Penrose argues is it takes place in beyond space-time itself, in fundamental time, as the fifth dimension that we can't see. So typically, like one of the popular models now is the multiverse, and essentially the multiverse relies on the cosmic inflation expansion as the origin of the universe. And the whole idea is that if you can expand energy faster than the time frequency uncertainty principle on the Planck scale, then you can create new energy at an exponential rate. You can, and from that, create matter, and so that's what the multi-universe means. It means that the inflationary origin of the universe is actually an eternal process because it's faster than time frequency uncertainty. But there's no way to falsify that model, the multiverse model of reality. And also that Roger Penrose's big point is that model doesn't take into account the quantum measurement problem itself of the collapse of the wave function. And that when you include the problem of the collapse of the wave function, you have to include gravity. And so his whole point is that because gravity is highly coherent at the origin of the universe, therefore time has to be asymmetric. And because it's asymmetric, that means it's non-commutative with frequency. So it's a non-commutative time frequency, and this is what causes the apparent time frequency uncertainty. So it's not that you don't have this multiverse, or as the cause of the inflation. Roger Penrose doesn't believe in the inflationary expansion of the universe, but rather it's precisely when all the matter collapses into a big black hole singularity at the end of the universe, the Hawking radiation is actually it has gravitational potential as dark energy, and that's what creates the new universe, but it does so with no spatial scale at all. It's called the cyclic conformal cosmology. So it has to do with that light. The matter turns into photons, and since photons don't experience space-time, then they're existing in this fifth dimension, the virtual photons, as the Hawking radiation. And that's what creates the new universe. But since this process exists beyond space-time itself, it's actually going on all the time at this fifth dimensional level of non-commutativity, so that the very end of the universe on a spatial scale is already happening in the fifth dimension all the time. And so this was the debate that Gerard de Hooft, Nobel physicist Gerard de Hooft, had with Nobel physicist Roger Penrose about a year ago in a live stream discussion, or maybe it was like 6 months ago. Essentially, Gerard de Hooft is arguing that, they're arguing the same thing, because he's saying that you have this, it's different whether you observe the black hole from an external perception or an internal perception. And so from an internal perception, it has negative frequency and time reversed signal as non-locality. But from an external perception, you're looking at the black hole into the past, and therefore it has negative energy. Whereas from the future, it has matter as mass that's creating the singularity of the black hole. When you're looking from the past into the future instead of from the future back into the past, that's on an external level. And this was the debate, because Penrose says, well, you have to have matter, causing like the black hole singularity, and where is the matter? And so, de Hooft is saying, well, this is from the internal perspective of the black hole. It's not matter, it's negative frequency from the future. And so what's interesting is that when you consider the non-commutativity to also be proto-consciousness without any spatial dimension, then the internal perception is actually what's occurring through meditation. That the meditation enables you in quantum biology to access and resonate this non-local, non-commutative proto-consciousness of the universe. And this is what maintains quantum biology as life on Earth. But this is also why modern science created the ecological crisis, because of the increase in gravitational entropy by assuming a symmetric space-time rest frame that tries to claim an external measurement as an objective consciousness that is using technology based on a linear time. And when you make these linear time measurements with external technology and using left brain dominance and right hand tools, you're actually going against the inherent left-handed amino acids of life on Earth that uses right brain dominance as ecology. And so when we use our technology to observe the accelerating expansion of the universe that's slowing down in time and speeding up in space, this is inversely related to the destruction of life on Earth as an acceleration of time on Earth, and an accelerating destruction of space as a contraction of life on Earth. And that's why I call this the strong misanthropic principle, as a spoof on commutative geometry science using the strong anthropic principle, which argues that symmetric math works so well, supposedly, and the constants of physics arise from symmetry as the standard model of science. Therefore, it could not be an accident that humans evolved with science that enabled us to discover these constants of physics from mathematics that works, and therefore science is inherently progress, and we're destined to help the universe evolve into another universe. And this was the argument of a book that won a science award. It won the Royal Society Best Science Book Award back. It's called Biocosm. I think that's the name of that book. It's written by a Yale lawyer. Maybe he's in Skull and Bones. I don't know. I think his name was, I can't remember. This was like 15 years ago. So maybe even longer. I have it in my 2012 book. So at any rate, this is what the third and final book is about. And now that the ecological crisis is starting to be what's the word? We can't ignore it. It's unignorable. I think that's a word. So this is how I plan my book series, because when just over a year ago, even then, people were still more in denial about the ecological crisis. They wanted to pretend it was just an internet fashion statement or something. But in fact, the ecological crisis is much worse than people realize, because the Arctic ice is melting much faster than people want to admit, because it's usually the ice is measured by extent, but it's actually based on the volume. And so the multi-year ice is pretty much all gone. And so even though the extent is still there, for the most part, the ice is very thin, and so it can go very, very fast. And I know that from experience, growing up around I grew up next to a lake in Minnesota, and so you could see that's how the ice clears out, is that it's still covering the whole lake, but then the next day it's gone, And the Arctic is the air conditioner for the whole planet. And there's also a huge 500 gigaton methane reservoir that's pressurized in the largest ocean shelf of the world, the most shallow ocean shelf, the East Siberian Arctic Shelf. And so that will cause the methane it's already beginning to release, but that will keep accelerating. And also the aerosol masking effect means that even as carbon emissions are reduced, mainly by shutting down coal plants, that heats up the earth even more, because the coal releases sulfur pollution, and the sulfur has been reflecting the solar radiation as the aerosol masking effect, also called the global dimming effect. And it turns out that it's been twice as bad as previously thought, which means that a 40% decrease in sulfur pollution will heat up Earth another 1 degree Celsius global average. And so all these policymakers focusing on how great it is that we're decreasing carbon emissions by shutting down coal plants are ignoring the science of the aerosol masking effect, and also the fact that the oceans have stored up 90% of the heat so far, and the oceans are releasing that heat along with the CO2 as the CO2 saturation rate is increased in the oceans, that the oceans can't absorb any more CO2, and so the CO2 is starting to release more from the oceans along with the heat. This is what Dr. Jim Massa talks about. He's the oceanographer in Alaska, and so he also is an expert on the ecology of the oceans, and so he's been very critical of a lot of the geoengineering plans, along with Professor Raymond Pierre Humbert, who's been very critical of the geoengineering schemes, because the cause of the global warming is from the CO2. But whenever we focus on the geoengineering, we're effectively delaying the decrease of the CO2 emissions. And so it's a deeper issue of the actual problem of relying on external measurements as science that assumes a symmetric gravitational rest frame for external, technology to try to decrease the entropy of matter, and without realizing that life itself is based on the decrease of the entropy of gravity as negative entropy from gravitational potential, which is dark energy from negative frequency and a time reversed virtual photon signal that's inherently entangled as proto-consciousness. So it's non-local in this fifth dimension. And so this is what in our original human culture they call this re-entry into first creation. And Dr. Brad Keeney, he has a whole article about this, about the Elan Bull dance as the first, the most important spiritual ritual of our original human culture at the first menstruation of females. And then the subsequent full moon healing dance that occurs every month, with the males dancing all night, the females singing and clapping, and how this is the truth of our human culture is supposed to be based on the lunar cycle, the lunar calendar, and the water energy, and water is inherently a negentropic molecule. It's a macro quantum molecule. So as water freezes, it actually increases in negative entropy even though it's going down in temperature, and that's what makes it a macro quantum molecule. And Professor J.L. Finney, he wrote about this like 20 years ago almost. He had an article called "What's So Special About Water," and that's what it was about. Is that it's a negentropic molecule, and so the tetrahedral structure of the water as a tetrahedron bond is actually H1.50, not H2O. And the reason it's H1.50 is because of this quantum negentropy process, where you have the virtual photons as a signal, as a quantum coherence, as the water starts to freeze, the density increases at the right before the freezing as the water right before it starts to freeze, and it has a reverse, a negative entropy, and then it expands as it freezes. So there's a reversal, and that's also the secret of the easy water. The easy water happens right before the water freezes due to this negative entropy of the splitting of the proton and the electron, causing this time reversed signal from the virtual photons. And so that happens inside our bodies based on the pressure, with the collagen as the most common protein in our body, and the ultrasound is a piezoelectric pressure of the bones and the collagen, and with the water then being split and causing a delocalized proton signal that's based on the virtual photons. And so then you can store up that virtual photon charge inside the body, and that's actually what creates new life on Earth, is that process. And Dr. Stuart, Professor Emeritus Stuart Hameroff, he now admits that water, plays a role in this quantum biology process, along with the microtubules and the tubulin ultrasound. There's also the water being split by the ultrasound outside of because normally in the microtubules and tubulin, it's a hydrophobic. So it's in oil. You're working with the lipophosphates in the neurons. And then outside of it, you're working with the water. But they both work through the ultrasound as the common frequency that then has this quantum undertone in the Schumann resonance for life on Earth. And the Schumann resonance is this time reverse signal at the 7.8 hertz. And so that's why quantum biology actually relies on the Schumann resonance signal as a quantum spin, because it's actually a time reversed signal due to this splitting of the water. And this is what Andrija Puharich figured out based on the de Broglie law of phase harmony, and how it's also an anti-gravity force. And so it also explains like telekinesis and other like paranormal powers, levitation, and life itself has this power, this anti-gravity force within it. And it's also the basis of the magnetic forces from the virtual photons, as Richard Feynman explained. He just didn't get the details correct about the quantum potential energy that's inherently non-local from the noncommutative time frequency. So that's essentially how consciousness and proto-consciousness are tied directly into the ecological crisis with gravitational entropy. And that's why people are in such deep denial about the ecological crisis, because it's directly hardwired into left brain dominance and right hand tool use. And anybody who's like a productive member of society, they're going to be left brain dominant and have right hand tool use, more, or at least operate in such a world. And so we will continue on into, like, as Noam Chomsky says, like lemmings going off the cliff, with modern human culture being insane, as Noam Chomsky has pointed out recently. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.